Hi YouTube. This is a response video to the Young Turks segment on if children or adults should be able to sue their parents for the effects that verbal and physical abuse or neglect had on them. Now, I just felt there was so much wrong in that video that I just had to make a response video. This was not made to get the attention of the hosts of the Young Turks by any means. This is for the victims and the sufferers of verbal and physical abuse or neglect. It doesn't matter if it was from your parents or a relative or a parental guardian, in conjunction with the way that society treats you or treated you. This is for the victims. This is also for people who thankfully never had to experience verbal and physical abuse or neglect, and people who never had to witness that. This is for the people who don't understand why these people, these victims, these sufferers can't grow up. Why they can't just move on and stop blaming their problems on other people. This is to explain why they can't just get past their problems and pick themselves up from their bootstraps. This is to explain why. And before I start this video, the links below are links to scientific evidence and data to support the claims in this video. People who suffer from verbal and physical abuse or neglect, they suffer from lifelong problems. Lifelong problems. Lifelong problems affect you for the rest of your life. You can do your own research. Anyone who's a skeptic can do their own research. There are hundreds of thousands of articles and books and documentaries on the subject of verbal abuse and physical abuse and neglect and the effects that it has on children and adults. So you can do your own research, and if you're too lazy, there are links in the description box to support the claims that I'm making in this video. And for the victims, while I'm making this video, I also wanted to give links to you so that you can get help and get resources if you're still suffering from the abuse that you faced. But it all depends on in the area that you live, and your gender, and also your income. So sadly, you will have to do your own research depending on your age, your gender, and your income to what help is available to you. But just know that there is help to you, and that looking for research or hotlines or any type of shelters that you can go to, there is help for you. Now, I wanted to start this video off explaining the difference between good parents who are bad at parenting and terrible parents. Now, I agree with the Young Turks that you should not be able to sue your parents if you have a good parent that was just bad at parenting. Now, what that means is that you have a parent that provided you with a loving, caring, nurturing home. They provided you with the basic necessities, and they also provided you with safety and warmth and love and all of the things that you need as a human being, a developing human being. But they just may not have had the education or the resources or the real life experience or understanding to provide you with further resources to help you with your life. Meaning that any child who may have had an emotional disorder, a psychological disorder, or a physical disability, that their parents may have not been able to get them the help that they needed at that point, which could have further progressed them in life. But the parents, provided them with enough support and guidance to get them to be able to function well enough. These parents may also not have the wherewithal to explain to their children or guide their children on the subject of finances or credit or relationships, be it friendships or significant relationships, sex, drugs. All of these issues, their parents may have not gone over it with them enough, but their parents still instilled in them enough structure to get them to the next stepping stone so that they can be successful and productive members of society. Now, with that being said, I do agree with the Young Turks. You shouldn't be able to sue your parents for being ignorant, but providing you with a lovely and loving home and providing you with the basic skills that you need to get to become an adult. But we're not talking about those parents. We're talking about terrible parents. Terrible parents never wanted or don't want to care for their children, or they lose interest in caring for their children. Maybe at one point they did want to have kids, but at some point they decided they no longer wanted them or wanted to take care of them. Terrible parents verbally abuse their children. Now, when people say verbal abuse, they don't mean a parent telling their kid to get off the internet or stop playing video games or to do their homework. That's not verbal abuse. And no one is referring to that when they say verbal abuse. When people say verbal abuse, they mean parents who tell their children from the day that they're born that they are worthless, that they are pathetic, that they are losers, that they should have had an abortion, that they should go die, that they should kill themselves, that they hate them, that it's their fault, that they'll never amount to anything. On a daily basis, that's verbal abuse. And that is damaging to a young child. And usually with verbal abuse, in turn comes emotional abuse. Emotional abuse means that a child feels responsible for existing, for being born. And every negative association in life, they think it's their fault because they're worthless, because everything is their fault, because they'll never amount to anything. So all of the world's problems, they hold on their shoulders because they should have never been born. And they hear that from the lips, from the mouth of their own parents. And usually with verbal abuse also is controlling behavior. With controlling behavior and verbal and emotional abuse, there is no support from their parents. Their parents don't give a flying about their kids. They don't support them in any activities that they may do. Nothing they ever do will be good enough. Never. They never take them to get any necessary items that they need, like deodorant or shampoo or tampons or boxers or underwear. They don't give them anything. They don't do anything for them. That is abuse. Terrible parents can also physically abuse their children. This can be slapping, punching, choking, pushing, beating until they're unconscious within an inch of their life. It can also be stabbing or threatening. That's physical abuse. And neglect. It can be no attention whatsoever. It can be no verbal abuse, no physical abuse, no acknowledgement. This means that they let their infants and their toddlers just waddle and wade in their own waste, their feces and their urine. And that they just let them lay there. They don't feed them. They don't hold them. They don't pay any attention to them. They can lock their children in closets. They can also lock their children in basements. They can also chain their children down like dogs. Or they can just not acknowledge their existence whatsoever. They can provide food and shelter. That's good for a dog. but not a human being. Contrary to belief, human beings, human babies, human children have the most underdeveloped brain of any other species on Earth. Of any other species. We can't walk, we can't talk, we have no understanding of anything. So we need the most nourishment, the most guidance, the most love, and the most protection more than any other species on Earth. And when you don't get that, when you hear you're worthless, you're pathetic, you're a loser, go kill yourself from your own parents, when you get slapped in the face every day that you wake up before you get out of the bed, if you get pushed down the stairs, if you're getting raped every day of your life before you're 4 years old, that causes damage. That causes damage to you. And not just psychological and emotional damage. It causes damage on a molecular level. For all these skeptics, look at the links below and research it yourself. It causes damage on a molecular level in their brain. It destroys parts of their brain, which causes anxiety, which causes phobias, which causes antisocial behavior, which causes psychological disorders, which causes physical disorders. It destroys their body before they even know or have the understanding what is happening to them. That's the cause of verbal and physical abuse or neglect. It destroys people. It deteriorates their brain. Now, if someone gets into a car accident and they can't walk anymore, they're given compensation. If someone's property is destroyed or stolen, they're given compensation. But if your brain is destroyed, if your body is destroyed by the people who are supposed to take care of you, you're not due any compensation for damages that you have to live with for the rest of your life. You're not due compensation. And we're not talking about 1 in every 1 million children. And we're not talking about just a black or a white issue. Verbal and physical abuse and neglect affects a lot of people. It affects anyone. Doesn't matter if you're white, you're black, you're Native American, you're Latino, or you're Asian. It doesn't matter if you're Christian or you're Muslim or you're an atheist. It doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor. It affects a lot of people. And what was so disturbing about the Young Turks video was that they laughed at the guy who was homeless and claimed that it was because of mistreatment from his parents. They laughed. They just automatically assumed that he was just some lazy man who didn't try hard enough. And they didn't know anything about his situation. They didn't know anything about the way that he was raised or the way his siblings were raised. They knew that his parents were in the project and that his mother said he never worked a day in his life. Let's go off of those 2 factors. And let's ask some questions, shall we? If he never worked a day in his life, why? If he never worked a day in his life as a teenager, why? Did his parents provide clothes for him to get to work? Because contrary to belief, you can't go to work with holes in your clothes or bleach stains or if they're stretched out of shape. You need good clothes to get a good job. It doesn't matter if it's at McDonald's or if it's at a retail joint. You need clothes. And not everyone lives next to a Salvation Army or a church to get decent clothes. So did his parents provide clothes for him to get to work? Did his parents provide transportation for him to go to and from work to get a job? You need to get to work. Not everyone lives in an area where they can walk to work. And teenagers, they can't be outside after curfew, after a certain time. So did they provide him with bus money, with tax money? Did they offer to drive him to and from work? Did he have 2 forms of ID? Underage kids cannot get ID without a parent. And abusive parents do not provide their children with resources that allow them to be self-sustainable. So if he had to rely on abusive parents to get a social security card, a state ID, or a birth certificate, it wasn't going to happen. So if he doesn't have 2 forms of ID, how would he get a job? Unless he worked under the table, but that would be illegal. His parents worked in the projects. That's a sign of low income. Usually low income families have children raise or take care of other children while the parents are doing other things. So was he forbidden from getting a job because he had to look after his other siblings or take care of other responsibilities that his parents should have been taken care of? Why is he homeless? Why is a young man homeless if he's a family member? Does he have a drug problem or addiction problem in association with the abuse that he may have suffered as a kid? Why is he homeless? If you did such a good job at child rearing, why is he homeless? And why is it funny that he is homeless when you don't know the story? The definition of a sociopath is someone who isn't able to have empathy for another human being's situation. Not being able to have compassion or conscience or moral responsibility towards another person, that's the definition of a sociopath. If you can't understand why a victim of rape, verbal abuse, physical abuse, or neglect turns out a certain way, or why they are suffering a certain way, you are a sociopath. You are a sociopath. Especially if you laugh at someone for acknowledging the pain that their parents inflicted on them because of the age they were. And for the people who say, my mother slapped me and I turned out fine. I was raped and I got over it. Why can't you? You know, that's the equivalent to telling a disabled person in a wheelchair, well, I broke my legs, I fractured my spine, and I walk. Why can't you? Because they're disabled. Everyone's abuse isn't the same. Everyone's neglect isn't the same. Everyone's mental state of health isn't the same. And not being able to understand that or empathize with people like that makes you a sociopath. You can't pick yourself up from that if parts of your brain aren't functioning. You can't pick yourself up from that. If you have a psychological disorder or emotional disorder or an anxiety disorder or a physical disability from the abuse that you suffered, there are no bootstraps to pick yourself up from in those cases. And you need help, support, and guidance to show you how to get around those issues. You need to be trained in another way, because the abuse that you suffered damaged you for life. Being an adult turning 18 does not flip some magic switch that makes all of the abuse, all of the anxiety, all of the phobias and disorders go away. Being an adult does not scrub clean the hate, the resentment, and the pain that these people suffer. If it wasn't acceptable for them to go through this as a child, what magic switch, what magic situation makes them responsible for their own suffering as an adult? If parts of their brain are damaged, if they have a psychological disorder, if they are schizophrenic, if they have bipolar disorder, if they suffer from major depression or post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of those conditions people suffer for life. So with those lifelong conditions, what are they supposed to pick themselves up from? What magic switch are they supposed to flip to make it all go away? If people could just get over these things that happen to them, no one would have an issue. No one would suffer from anything. If people could just, oh, it's not that big of a deal, I'm gonna get over it. If people had that ability, do you really think that there would be so many sufferers if it was that easy? And CPS, Child Protective Services, is a joke. They don't save every child. They don't. And in some cases, I'm not going to denounce them. Some cases, they do really help kids and families. They do. But a majority of the time, they put the children in a more abusive and dangerous situation. The facts and statistics are below, and you can do your own research for all the skeptics out there. And it's naive to think that Child Protective Services fly in like some angel and save every child that is suffering. It's naive. Most children who go to foster care or homes or orphanages face, well, not orphanages, but if they go to foster homes or go to homes specifically designed for children to be in protective custody for volunteers, they often end up in more abusive situations, meaning that they get raped more, or physically abused more, or verbally abused more, or more neglected than they were in their own home. And that's an issue. It's a real issue. And it affects society. You can ignore it if you want, but it affects society in some way. Because physically abusing a child is basically ensuring their failure. And of course, there are few cases, seldom cases, where people, they face terrible abuse and rape and verbal abuse and neglect as children, but they grew up to be upstanding citizens. But you know what? Those people had help. Those people had support, and those people had guidance, and they were taken out of their environment. They didn't save themselves. They didn't pick themselves up and just get over it. They had help. They had support, and they had guidance. And not everyone has it. The cold hard truth is the majority of people who are abused become nothing. Because victims of abuse go numb. They go numb so that they don't have to feel anything. So that they don't have to hurt anymore. So that they don't have to suffer. They go numb. And they mostly turn to drugs or alcohol so that they can feel happy. So that they can feel one moment of relaxation. Because society is always barking at them. Oh, what happened to you wasn't that bad. What happened to you was in the past. You're responsible for you now. If you live every day of your life being berated and shot down, and then you go out into the world and people reinforce that idea onto you as a child and adult that what happened to you wasn't significant and you can move on from it, it reinforces that you're nothing. It reinforces that what happened to you was okay. It reinforces what your abusive parents taught you all along. that you're nothing, that you're worthless, and you deserve to get hit, you deserve to get raped, you deserve to be neglected. Abuse ensures the failure of an adult. A lost adult is a product of a child with no guidance. Now, I'm here to give a couple of life experiences of children and adults that I witnessed being abused. Now, thankfully, I had good parents. I had really good parents. I am a product of transgenerational abuse, and that means that my parents were sufferers of neglect and abuse. But they raised me as the best of their abilities, and they provided a very loving and caring environment for me. And they did a good job. A really good job. But I was raised in a very backwards country town where I witnessed a lot of people who were my friends and a lot of people who were close to me and that I built a bond with. I witnessed their deterioration from abuse. And for people to sit there and say to kids and teenagers and adults to get over it, it's disgusting. I lived next to 2 boys and 1 girl. Their mother, they had a fairly normal life, but their mother started to develop alcohol and drug problems, and she had a boyfriend who she let, and when I say let, I mean let, beat and rape all 3 of her children, boys included. Lots of people called to see Child Protective Services. Told my teachers. No one did anything. These kids would have black eyes. These kids would shake. You can see the deterioration of their souls. Once little kids that would run around happy and play were dead. Children, dead. Within a matter of 4 years, dead. They slouch. They did bad in school when they were very gifted. It's sick. Another example is, I have so many, sadly, so many examples because I live in a very sick town where people just like to ignore children getting abused because when kids do bad things, something bad happened to them. Another example is a little girl that I was very, very close with until about the end of middle school. But about the beginning of middle school, she had told us that her grandfather was raping her and molesting her. She told her teachers, she told her friends. Nobody did anything. Nobody cared. And she started suffering academically. She started having a problem concentrating in school and understanding the materials, and people at school just started calling her dumb and retarded and dopey. She started getting bullied, and people knew, but nobody cared. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. I actually think once we got to high school, she tried to kill herself. And also, older people too. There was a woman who had a beautiful daughter, Her daughter is well-rounded, and but the mother herself was a victim of abuse from her mother, and her mother had become elderly, and she needed assistance and care. And this woman was in her 60s, and her mother was in a bed in her home, beating her and berating her in front of her family at 60 years old, telling her that she was nothing and that she'd never amount to anything. These situations are disgusting and it's gross. And for people to sit there and make it like what these people go through and what these people suffer is nothing and they should just get over it because they're an adult, it's sick. It's sick, and it's sociopathic behavior, and it's psychopathic behavior if you can't empathize with the pain that people go through. I didn't experience it, but I saw them go through it. My friends, my neighbors. Did you see people die and deteriorate and kill themselves? You see them do drugs and you see them commit murder and go to jail. You see them empty. And you see what they are, what they were, and what they become. And you know if anybody would have just did something, if anybody would have helped, if anybody would have cared, it wouldn't be like that because they weren't what they became a few years prior to the abuse. If you're in a car accident, if you can make a malpractice suit against a doctor. You can sue someone for stealing your stuff or breaking your belongings or breaking a contract. So why can't you sue your parents for destroying your brain, for taking away parts of your life that you can never get back? And this video is for the victims. This video is to tell you that you are beautiful. And there are people who do care, and it's not your fault. And if you're still suffering, if you still feel that pain and that anger and that hate and that resentment, you feel it for a reason. And it's not something that you can just get over. You need help, you need support, and you need guidance. You needed it when you were a child, and you still need it as an adult. It affects you. And for the skeptics who believe that it's adults that need to just own up and take responsibility, do your research. But this video is for the victims. Someone does care. I love you, and you're beautiful, and it's not your fault. And you shouldn't have to suffer because we live in a society filled with sociopaths.